Oh, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Low-Code Campfire number 33. This is a community gathering, all skill levels welcome. We're just here to show and tell about techniques and challenges, experiences. We've had a lot of things that have been solved collectively by this group, so it's great that you're here. We record all these episodes. This is recorded, and all the past episodes are on our YouTube channel. So make sure to subscribe to that and set your alerts so that you can know when we post them, usually the next day. It's a meeting format, so it's a pretty informal agenda. We'll talk about whatever's going on with you, things that have been contributed to the community Campfire website, talk about things coming up in the product, things that were submitted in advance. So we'll talk about all that. Very few rules. Be nice and use mute if it's appropriate in your case. Feel free to submit questions and topics in advance. You can use that QR code or the links that appear in all the invitation emails. So hello, good morning. I think I got through that in record time.
Good morning, Dale.
Hello.
And Riva. Jeff.
A couple of new faces that I haven't seen to the group. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Good morning, all.
Great. So first call, any burning questions, anything? I mean, we got a lot of topics that have been submitted in advance, and we will not go without things to talk about today, but is there anything first on your mind?
I have hopefully a really simple question. Has anybody benchmark the performance of using tokens from MyTokens to populate forms versus embedding it into the load form initiation directly from SQL? Okay.
Have you, Jeff?
I am going to, because we have some things that are like I'm trying to track down performance issues, and that's one of the areas I'm going to look into. And I thought, well, if somebody's already done it, I'm going to ask and see if I can save myself some work. I'll keep you looped in.
It's funny you mentioned that, Jeff, because one of the things I'm looking at, I've had an issue with it in the past, but I kind of put it on the side, but I just started looking at it again today, is the fact that if I have an action form and a grid, for argument's sake, and the form is really not doing all that much, the form will take longer to load than the grid does, and the grid could be loading thousands of records. So I'm trying to figure out what I could do to get those forms to load faster.
So Jeff, to your question, a couple of things. One, I did benchmark tokens and caching. So I would definitely take advantage of turning on caching if it's appropriate in your case. And caching can, especially like if you're reloading the same form data, somebody hits refresh, whatever, if it's unlikely to have changed in the time period that they're looking at it, you're going to save a lot of time on second load, or if lots of users are doing them. So caching is big. But then just thinking about how it does it, when you do when you load a value in the SQL statement that loads the grid, it's evaluated at that time and in bulk. When you do it in a token, and assuming the token might be making a SQL call, then you're doing extra SQL calls for every row of the grid. So I would be surprised if you get better performance out of tokens. If I understand your question right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's mostly with forms, but yeah, it's definitely I'm going to look into the cache. So thank you, guys.
Absolutely, good question. And yes, we have to be nice. What else? I I think we got a record turnout here today, so that's great. And this seems to be gaining momentum, and I appreciate it. I'm going to mention, it was in the email, but anyone who has time after we get done, we're going to turn off the recording and socialize just a little bit. So feel free to hang around after our hour is done or whenever we run out of things to talk about. So first thing we normally do is take a look at contributions to the Campfire website. And I hadn't realized till I went looking just before this meeting that Anthony added a contribution. I don't see him here today, but this might be useful for someone. The module access menu. So a solution to list all the action form, action grid, tabs pro modules on your site and be able to get to them from your edit page without having to use the edit button on the page. So let's I just briefly took a look at this before the meeting, as I said. So it tells exactly, the description kind of goes into that in depth. And so you got a listing and all the things. I'm going to look at one of my contributions that I know is out here. So there was a dynamic grid was one, dynamic questions and answers was one. So on the dynamic grid, we wanted to go in and edit the grid. That opens in a new page, and we get to see the data that was behind it. So that's kind of an interesting solution, all in one, everything. I see there's a module settings button as well. So let's see what that does. Jumps right to it. So you can go in and change your settings. And notes, what does this do? New note for the module. I'm not sure I know where that goes. Looks like we don't, maybe that's not in there yet. So we'll, maybe that's yet to come. But anyway, that's an interesting solution. And since just kind of talking about this for anybody who's new, the campfire.planetapp.com, the idea is that things that actually work and you might want to share with others, we put them in here and make them available. Everyone is a very responsible low-code engineer on the site. And so if you want to be part of this, be able to open it up, see how these are put together, what they do, and then potentially export it and put it onto your site, or just build it and put it onto your site, you can do that. So if you're not part of Campfire website and want to be, shoot me your email address. You can put it on the chat if you like, and I'll pick it up and add you in. Okay, so that's the new contribution to Campfire. And we try to organize those so you can search and find them. So hopefully you'll put all that descriptive information so that people can find your contributions when you make them. I know I've referred back to them. I'm going to throw out a challenge. I think I'm going to come back to this, but I'm going to give you a chance to talk about it. And make a note here. We did have one that wants to be added, so I'm going to make sure that I don't forget about that. So, oh no. So there was this discussion, I think Mark started it, but about more multi-portal, and it kind of generated a pretty big discussion about what needed to happen in licensing and whatnot. And so I want to talk more about this either today, or we can have a private conversation or an after recording conversation. Just wondering, we want to understand what your use cases are for multi-portal Python app, and the modules that you need to use, because we're trying to formulate where the product goes and the licensing and things like that. So just kind of giving you a heads up, I'm going to circle back to that one here in a few minutes. Bogdan, I see you're here today. Do you have anything you want to talk about community 118, 119 questions you want to ask?
Yes. I'm not sure if this is the right spot for it, Dale, but we had that reports piece that I wanted to bring to the community.
Yes.
Is it later? Okay.
I don't know. I don't remember what I've got in here today. Let me see if I can find it. If you want to hit on it while I look for it, that would be great.
Sure. So basically, in action form, we have this reports piece. So it's somehow built in where form data gets magically saved to the database, and you can do a number of things with them. We want to remove that features. No kidding. We just want to change it a bit, and we got a solution that I think it will be useful, especially as we go a bit in plant and app world, where you have other solutions that I think are more useful to store data. So to make it less, let's say, less intrusive to users that don't use it. So I have a solution that I want to present to you today and get your feedback on what your thoughts are, because it feels like it's still a very used feature.
Are you set to be able to do that?
Yes, if you give me a second, I can start sharing and presenting to get stuff on the right screen. Cool. Okay, so let's maybe start with the admin side. So the feature that I'm talking about, it's in the settings. It's called the enable reports. In the first version of Action Form, it used to be even turned on by default, but then as we start building more robust applications, it became something optional that maybe people with contact forms or just a form and a grid would use. So enabling reports here, of course, is not enough. Then there's some things set up to do in the fields to enable, to trigger each field to go to the reports, because some fields like passwords, you never want to maybe save in a report, or let's say sensitive information, credit card information, things like that. So yeah, we are thinking to change this feature a bit, because nowadays with Plant and App, it doesn't use this much anymore, so it doesn't make sense it's here. And our motivation is also to simplify the product, to create less confusion about where data should go. And to add even more flavor to it, there's an action. Let me find the button actually. There is an action that is called save data to reports. Save report in the database. That basically this action can also be used to trigger us let's say a save on other events, or to control the flow differently. Otherwise, the data always saves when the button completes. Yes. So right now we want to change it first to remove all the checkboxes from the fields. So to remove this save to report from each field, and instead have the list directly on the action. So then it will be here. You decide which fields go into the report. Just from the action. And of course, we also get rid of the setting in general setting, because you no longer enable it. Just by putting this action, of course, you enable saving data into the reports. So I think that simplifies things. I mean, we get rid of a couple of settings, so that's always easier for new users as well. But then also there's some stuff happens. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this ugly screen that we inherited. But basically, if you are on the page and if you go to the module actions, to the module action. There is a reports button in here as well. That is used to where is it here? That it's used to access whatever is in the report table. And I mean, most of the people from some point onwards, they start using maybe Action Grid most of the time for this. I think this screen is rarely used, but this basically allows you to download the data as CSV from the database, and also to upload it back. And of course, here at the top bottom, when we released Action Grid, that was the transition towards Action Grid module. So what we are thinking now is to get rid of the screen and turn this into an action. So then you can create an action to download the report. So you can have a button that is maybe admin only, staff only, that downloads the report. It will have similar settings like this one. And for the upload, we are actually thinking to drop, to not be able to upload data back directly. Of course, if you want to upload it back, you could always use SQL and other actions on a button. So this is mainly the simplification that we wanted to do, and I wanted to check with because I know many people use it over time, to check if you see any concerns, if you have any concerns why we shouldn't do it, or if you have any suggestions how we can do it even better.
So a couple of things. One, don't be shy to jump in, and if you have an opinion now. Also, we have our feedback form. So if you think of something after the meeting and you want to share that, that's another way to pass that along. But please, if you do, let us know.
Dale, Bogdan. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you. Dale, Bogdan, Jerry here. I'll be real fast. And over 10 years of programming in this environment, I've never used it, not even one time. So on this conversation, I'm out. It's all good on my end, no matter how you approach it.
I'll speak on the flip side of that. I use it quite a bit. More specifically, my clients use it, because when they set up a form and I give them the tools to work on their form sometimes, and they always ask, how am I going to get this data? Can I get a spreadsheet? And so I point to this, and the problem is solved. Now, obviously, I'm going to tell them, well, hey, I can make it better and prettier and all that with a grid. But it might be a moot point, but I'm not going to have access to Action Grid unless I'm in Plant and App. So some clients who haven't gone that far would be out of the loop if they didn't have the report. So I like it. I was a little bit worried when you said you had news about that. I thought, oh no, it's not going away, is it? But I think you've made it easier. I like the idea of going to an action and just clicking on all the fields that I want to be in the report and unchecking the ones that I don't all at one time instead of popping around each field. I like that. The changes look fine to me, Bogdan. If you were to make an enhancement where it would make it easier to remove data from the report database, I would like that. That's one little idea I would contribute.
Yeah, well, my clients use it also a lot, and we also use the other way around. That is, when you want to enhance your action form data, so you can send them an email with a link to the entry which they have filled in, and they can continue at a later stage. So that's another usefulness of the reports feature.
So basically, you use it a lot for the, let's say, editing back the form capability.
Yes, I have two specific use cases in which people apply for a job and fill in a very large form where they don't have the data at the point where they start filling the form. So they can hit a button that sends them a link to their partly filled form. So that's the use case.
But once they finalize the submission, do you keep it in the reports table or do you move it in other tables?
No, in this particular case, I keep it in the reports table. And what they do, they especially the big form, this is registering specific illnesses for research.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get the download as CSV. They use it in that way because the form is pretty complicated and we don't have that in the database.
Mm-hmm. Good.
I would chime in to say I use it the same way to bring back forms that weren't completely filled in.
Jim, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, I did until I heard what the last two speakers were saying, and then I'm thinking, oh, those are really good ideas. I need to try those because it's years since we've used used this in any great way. A couple of questions. If you're going to change it to action for downloading the CSV, how would I pass in the date parameters? Because when we have used it in the past, people would want to download a particular period, and the period they will be downloading would depend on who's looking at the form and when. So it'd be difficult to make it part of the form unless you had part of the form where you could say what bit do I want. So you have a form which has a section on it which is for the admins,
Mm-hmm.
and the rest of it which is for filling in, which might be a bit awkward. The other was about terminology. When we've had new people looking at this, the term report hasn't been particularly helpful for them. It's not immediately obvious, and I think where you've got the save to a report, you're saving the record. The fact that it's going into a thing called reports isn't immediately obvious to people. So I think maybe changing the language, if it's going to be quite a different type of feature, changing the language might help, because it's the automatic save, or it's the default save, or the as I say, I'm trying to find. I'm not sure what the other term might be, but reports, at least for us, the reports has had a different connotation.
Yeah. I understand. Save record sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah. As for the other questions, yes, I see these all being transferred as parameters of the download, let's say download report action. And of course, like you said, you could have some fields on the front end for the dates that you only show to the same rows, to the staff or to the admins, and then you use those in the action. And of course, you can mix and match. So, for example, here maybe it will not make sense to expose this to business users so much. Maybe this you just decide for everyone, and maybe you don't expose not even this. You just expose last 30 days, like last 90 days, because I think business users usually want more stuff like that. This year, last year, this quarter, So then you do the mathematics behind the scenes. What about this upload piece? Did anybody ever used it to upload data back to the reports table?
Well, I tried it once, but I didn't see it, so no.
No, we never tried it either.
Mm-hmm.
Tried it, but I didn't find it that useful.
We only had these use cases where maybe somebody needed to download the data to sanitize it and upload it back, especially as it feeds directly to the listing, So if you have a grid that uses the action form data source and you want to edit that data, I think you can do it from action grid as well, actually. But this is another way that people used to do it back in the day, from what I can remember.
Yeah, the combination with Action Grid is actually quite nice because you can delete entries there, and that's the main reason for the Action Grid. Of course, showing the data, but deleting them, the false records out of them, is also very nice.
Okay, I think there's only one other aspect that we are thinking, that we are going to have, let's say, migration problems. Because if we take out those options and if people had them enabled, then yes, we can generate this action automatically, but where do we place it? You know, on all buttons at the end, or should it be in the middle, or where should it be, you know? So then we decided that maybe it's a good thing to rebring this section that we have on submit. We used to have it again in the first versions where you could only have one button. You know? So we could use this section that executes for all the buttons that submit successfully. You know? So then we automatically add the action here, so that will solve the problem. And I think it's useful sometimes to have like sometimes logging actions or things like that that happen on every button, so you don't have to duplicate them.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Would just be whether those run, that on submit runs before or after other buttons.
I think maybe we are thinking at the end of all the other buttons.
Yep, I think it would just be great to make that very clear when we add that back in, when it happens.
Do you see a need to have both, or a preference over the other?
I could see that where you have a button that's running some JavaScript or something like that, that you might want to save that form off to the reports table, and then act upon the data with another button or something like that, where you'd be before. You want to make sure it's saved to a table.
If I can just say something, in the past, I've written a lot of forms where I give my users the option to save and, for argument's sake, save and close, or save and add new. The two buttons will both do the same thing, but one button will do some extra steps that the others don't. So the ability to have the option to do both, for argument's sake, like before button submit and after, would be nice, because then I would be able to, let's say for argument's sake, put my save code in the before button submit, and then the actual button of the save and close, all it does is close the form. Because save is always going to happen before it. And then when I have to, modify it or otherwise manage that code, I only have to worry about one spot that I have to fix, rather than every single button that I added that code to.
But if it always saves, what if the user wanted to cancel?
Then you wouldn't be able to use that particular feature. But if you have a situation where it's, you always want something to happen.
Yeah, and I think with the cancel button, it's a bit obscure, but this is, I'm not 100% sure, but I have a good feeling that if you take out causes validation, I think that's something like it didn't submit successful or something like that. It says here off for cancel buttons. I vaguely remember this for a long time ago.
And it's not actually submitting anything it's not passing anything to the server.
I think
for a cancel, we typically put in just a link to somewhere else, and it forgets or reload the page, and it forgets everything that was put in. We don't have the situations we've had. The cancel hasn't had to remove anything. It hasn't had to do anything other than take the user away and forget everything they put in.
Yeah.
So in that case, you would have a link. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think what this causes validation does, if it's off, so validation no longer happens when you click the button. And of course, you get all the data that was filled in, but then you can do programmatic stuff like, we are sorry to let you go and send to various pages based on other information, or send an email or things like that, which normally you wouldn't be able to do on the front end as easily. I'm not sure if we bypass saving to the reports for this. I have a feeling that we also do this. We bypass saving to the reports. Or we save it with a different state, I think. In one of the columns in the reports table, there's a state column, a status column that probably will say canceled or something like that. I will have to double check this, but I think it works like this. Okay, so I think it was very good feedback. Thank you all for helping.
Great. Did you have anything else you wanted to jump into, Bogdan, while we're...
I mean, nothing. I mean, from what I announced during the cafe as well on Wednesday. So we are pushing the beta for 2 days because there's a legal holiday in Romania. So we are giving more time for the Romanian team to do the QA for the release. Other than that, we are still on track.
Good. All right. So good. Thank you for that. I got a question several months back. I put XXX when I'm incomplete on something, so that's not a rating. That's a marker. Anyway, on Campfire, there's a question of InfoBox. How do we use it? When to use it? What is it? And that's actually our training thing. So I put together a quick one just to demonstrate that and maybe encourage you to check it out. So if you were to go to the campfire.plantanap.com website today, I've got it turned on just as an introduction. So we're seeing, instead of if we were to skip the introduction, this is the website shows up as normal. And so this is the normal experience that you'd see this reading and a couple of buttons, but with the training turned on, when somebody browses to this page, it can highlight pieces of the screen and provide information. So since this is your first time here, let's take a look around. Please read the introduction. So you're encouraged to read this and say next. And then it says, well, if you've never signed up for Campfire before, this is the place to start, and it gives a couple options. If we click sign up now, we would be taken right to the sign up for this meeting. But we say next, and it says use this button to see the contributions. So it's really all about onboarding, showing people around, and so we'll continue through this guide. We'll say go there now. It takes us to a different page. It highlights that this is the contributions, and so we positioned oddly there, so I had to scroll to see it, but this is a listing of all the contributions, and we can click and it'll show you, it'll take you to a contribution. And so this was just a quick guide that I put together to illustrate, and then you're done and the guide goes away. So if you haven't used it before, the interface looks something like this. If I'm going to go to the configuration page, and it's here under training. If you, so the guide that I put together was called An Introduction to Campfire. And one important one that's very useful is interactive mode. So I'm just going to switch right away to interactive mode, and that puts the guide on the left and your website on the right. So if we were to edit the guide, we can see it has a title and what it's about. this, what triggers it. So in this case, it triggers on every page, every time that you go to the home page. There's a lot of different ways that you can trigger it, and it can include things, for example, like URL parameters. So you can have the guide hidden until somebody actually asks for it, clicks a link to get it started. So you can experiment a little bit with triggers, but that's what gets the guide started. And then when you dig into the guide, you can see the different steps. So my guide had 5 steps: an introduction, encouraging people to sign up for the webinar, view contributions, and this is an example of the contribution. So in this, I've used 2 different techniques, and I'm going to show them to you. One is when you look in on the introduction, it takes you to the page and it highlights, because I've clicked show overlay, it highlights a section of the page. The thing that gets highlighted is that you get to pick a DOM element. And the easiest way to do that is to choose the point and click. So you can point to something, and that becomes the thing that gets that this onboarding, this comment gets attached to. You can add as many buttons as you like to achieve what you want to do. So I added 2 buttons: a next button, which has the word next to it, next on it, and the action is go to the next step. The actions for these are found under guide. So you can either go to a particular step, go to a next step, previous step, or just say that it's finished. So this one is go to the next step, whatever the next step is in the list. And so if we were to look at the list here, when you say next, it's going to go on to this next one. Then I added a skip this introduction button, and that is a finish guide action. So if you click that, it goes away. If we were to go into the sign up for the webinar, I added 2, I'm not saving, so we're seeing some weird stuff on the right, and I'm trying to sneeze anyway. I added a next button and a sign up now button. So the sign up now is a redirect to URL. You're probably all very familiar with that. So it's sending us out to Zoom, and so it just gives you a way to guide people around into your application. It takes a little bit of playing with, but it does work. So I think that question came from Jim, but if anybody else, was there, does that help? Does it clear up what that is and how to at least get started with it?
It does, so it also raises some questions. So is that training table where those are listed just a standard table that you could build a guide for a business function and then have people pick it from a grid or something if they, I need to enter an invoice.
Walk me through that.
Find the right spot in the
I'm going to guess yes, that it's.
Then there's actually a module that's guide menu.
Yeah.
So if you go to the page and add it, it opens all the guides available for that page, I think.
Oh, cool. Okay.
I'm not sure if it still works, but it's there.
Come on, everything works.
I haven't seen it in a while, that's why I'm saying.
Let's see,
Go open persona bar, so advanced settings. Yeah.
It's trying to run the guide for me, but guide menu, we could drop it on here just to see what it looks like.
So it appears in the bottom right, but I think you still need to do some setup to decide which ones will appear in there. Oh, okay.
Pretty simple. So to make this make perhaps a little bit more sense, if I were to go to the guide and turn it off, so if we were to edit this, and if the trigger, if we didn't have a trigger, for example, I think that might get where we want to go. So it's there, but it's not triggering. So now we don't have this automatic, but it has this menu that's popping up. So if you want to activate it, you could just click it and then it starts its thing. So Jim, I think that would get you where you were just trying to go. To your question, it probably is a table as well, but this is the easier way.
And then the other part of that question would be from Bogdan's memory, is this a securable or guide securable so that different groups can see guide, only certain guides?
Yes, if you go to the, I think in the job, we also have, there are some, let's see.
There's some rules that are.
Yeah, I think for triggers, yeah, you need to add a trigger, and of course the trigger can have conditions. So I think that's how you can do it. We have token based on, you can do anything there. So I think this is the only way you can do it now.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And I think the buttons, if I remember, the button permissions, you can make different buttons available. So you could have make certain things, certain functionalities only available based on role. Similar to what we do with listings. So that's it, all about onboarding. So check, we did that. Jim also asked a question a while back about the current set of colors and fonts are hard for old eyes. I don't know who you're talking about, Jim, but they are hard for mine sometimes. So when I mentioned this to Bogdan, he said, well, if we were to load a custom CSS for the designers and perhaps show you have a CSS example file or our default CSS file there so that you could just edit it, would that get you where you wanted to go? This is Jim Anthony.
No, that would work for me. I mean, it's more just searching all the locations, trying to find it. The one that caused me a couple hours of frustration was the Razor script editor, where it was like the grayed out comment it wasn't obvious to me. So it's like, oh, there's got to be a CSS file somewhere, and I couldn't find it.
So I didn't know particularly where your struggle was, but I spent some time with it, and the way it is now, without an admin CSS file, not that I'm a CSS expert, but I couldn't get certain things to load the way it is, and not impact the front page, the non-design mode of the page as well. So it's I think we would benefit from that.
Yeah, I had the same problem with Razor comments. They are almost impossible to read.
Okay.
So
just on the topic of the Razor script editor for the tokens, where is the script text that we save? Where is that stored?
I think it saves as a file on disk. I think it's under app data folder. But
okay. Yeah, because for the regular Razor scripts, we always access those from the file system. Never go through the DNN editor. And if we could do the same for the tokens, that would make it a lot easier, because then you can open it in VS Code and get all the good stuff that comes with that.
So can you repeat, because I'm not sure if I understand correctly. So you are asking about which Razor scripts?
the Razor where you have a MyTokens
Yep.
token, which is script.
Yep.
So are those stored as CSHTML files somewhere?
Yeah, I think that's what we do. We save them on disk. I will check. I will take this as a homework.
Yeah, because that would.
Yeah.
Because I agree with everyone else that the Razor script editor is not a pleasant experience. It's all right filling out the rest of the stuff, but if you've got a complex code, it's not the great place to be.
Okay, so next topic, and one that we promoted a little bit. Mark asked, Mark, you still here? Yes. When is the development and production plus production model most rational and helpful? And what techniques do you use to make it easier to roll out the changes? And there was some more detail about that, which I'll put up on the screen, but I think the summary is that if you use a multi-environment, it comes with a certain amount of overhead. And so where do you draw the line? When do you just stick with a production only versus when do you involve multiple environments? Did I capture your question well, Mark? Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think you explained it well. Looking for ideas, see what people are doing.
Mostly doing it 3 times, one in development, one in test, and one in production.
We had long discussions about how best to handle this, and we have come up with a model where we have 3 environments: a development, a production, and a separate test environment. What we've done is moved the data that is not part of, or that is specific to the application, into a separate database and link it back through not symbolic links, but through link tables. So we've got the data database as a separate entity, so that we can keep a different data database on the 3 environments. For the DNN bit with plant and app inside it, what we do there is we have and this is the bit that's most manual, changes to the schema in the, well, no, that's not. That changes the schema in the data. What we do with the DNN part of the database is to move from development to test or development to production. Is essentially we blow away what's in production and replace it with a database restore from dev into production. Now, obviously, that does cause issues with user records. The way we've got around that is for the end users, they're logging in with Active Directory authentication. So those accounts are automatically created. So there we go. Those accounts are automatically created when someone logs in, so we don't worry about persisting those. Okay, they may have a different user ID, but where we're linking on a user's identity, we're using email rather than user ID. So as I say, we can just blow it away. For the small group of admins on the site, we have them set up as users on the development instance. So when that development, we take a cut of that development instance and overwrite in production or overwrite in test, those users travel with them. So we've been using that for just getting on for 2 years now, and it is quite a cumbersome process you get to the point where you say, right, we're going to do a new release, and there is some ceremony around that. We'd like to get to a CI/CD type or an automated approach, but we haven't plucked up the courage to do that yet. What we do find, though, that the small ad hoc changes are done, as the rest of you said, that you try them out on dev, and then you repeat the process on production, because it's going to be a few weeks before we're going to roll out the new version, and we want to have to fix in production straight away. But that's, as I say, we've spent a long time trying to figure out a way of doing it, and that was the best we came up with. If anyone wants to see more detail how we document that and what the release process we've come up with, you can give me a shout and we can talk you through.
Thank you, Jim. What about the situation where user input could be happening while you're working on your development site?
But if use, as I say, the user, there are two types. There are two types of user activity. One is where users are adding data, so they're filling in forms and it's populating the data tables. As I say, the application data that's collected is held in this separate database, which we don't touch. We just put another instance. Well, we replace the instance of DNN and the table the user inputted data is linked through SQL. What we don't have happening on production is anyone touching the pages, the views, the modules on pages. So they're not interacting with the design. The things that are held in the DNN and the plant and app design tables and values. That's all done on dev, and then that's what's overwritten. So if someone wants a new page, for example, it has to be done on dev first, and then when dev is copied to production, that's when the new page appears in production.
Right.
So it's drawing this distinction between what is the data the application is collecting, which we can keep in the separate table, a separate database and tables, and what is the design and the structure that's part of DNN that has to stay within the DNN database, and that's what's overwritten each time.
All right. Thank you, Jim.
Are your data tables plant and app tables or custom tables?
For this one, we started it a while ago, so they're all custom tables in this case. But I think you could probably do the same thing in other, with the automatically generated one, but it would be a sort of retrospective process. As I say, we set up the separate database with all the data that's collected, and then just create the links back.
Interesting. You've put a lot more thought into it than I have.
Yeah.
It was a big project, and we were lucky enough to have some people dedicated to it for a little time. So we had the luxury of sitting down and having long and very circular discussions for quite some time.
And just out of curiosity, how large a user base is involved in what you're doing?
Well, there are two types of user. In terms of the people who are on the admin side who need to be copied over, we're talking about a dozen accounts, which are staff members who manage this process.
Mm-hmm.
But the end users who are putting in data, we're talking 6,000 people. The system is for students to register to graduate. So anybody who graduates from the university has to go and fill out the form saying they want to graduate, and then it's linked to their student record if they've if they've actually achieved an award, what sort of award it is, and then which ceremony do they go to, are they bringing guests, that sort of thing. So the number of people who are actually inputting data is in the several thousands. But as I say, those accounts are only the fact that there's a user in the DNN database is not particularly important, because it can be regenerated every time that instance is overwritten, because they're logging in with Active Directory. We couldn't do it if we were using the DNN user management. It wouldn't be possible.
Yep.
Right.
But I suppose it would, the same would work if you're using Azure AD or any sort of social login. You would be able to, any sort of third-party authentication mechanism would allow you to have this model.
Great, thanks for that. All right, I'm going to move on to one more pre-submitted topic, which was Jim Anthony was asking about some security risk questions, and in two different scenarios. And the question was about how do we set things up. So I'm just going to read what we've got here. For if you have a publicly hosted website that needs access to a private database behind a firewall, one fix was to open the firewall, the web host, to connect to the database with a very limited access SQL credential, and then the connection string would be in the web config. And another was to put the other scenario, to put plant an app instance and create APIs to connect to the internal database. So you would open the firewall to allow web host only to connect to the API. So, I mean, that was a real quick read of this. Jim, did I get your question correct? And
you did. I mean, it's funny because it's, you know, my last line there refers to the previous question, which is, you know, I know doing a planted app instance behind the firewall with APIs would give us the most flexibility, but the copy and paste from dev to test to everything like that would just take so much more effort. But I'm not sure on the security risk. I've never had a database that's out there on a, you know, going through the firewall on a client site before. So I'm mostly concerned what kind of experiences people had and what security risks I might be overlooking, you know, in doing the simple, hey, here's a connect, open the firewall, you know, with a connection string.
anyone with experience in this area? When I was speaking with Jim about this, I kind of was leaning towards the creating API endpoints, just in that it provides good documentation about and threading requests through these APIs. I mean, there's security available to it a couple of different ways, and you can certainly limit it to specific sites, but it clearly indicates the ways that people can interact with the website, not just the security on the credential, but exactly, you know, a lot of control over what the SQL that gets run, things like that. But I'm not a network guy. They seem equally secure to me.
Am I right in thinking that the internal database is the sort of thing I was describing there, where it's the application data? This isn't the database that drives plant and app. This
Correct.
is the one that holds the real data, the operational data that you're collecting and managing. That just happens to be the Plantain app just happens to be an interface to that data. Is that right?
You are correct.
Yeah. Yeah, the APIs would seem to be the best way of doing it. But what we've done is having an depends how live your data is. We've got integrations where we cache the relevant corporate data, just the small bit of the corporate database that we need for the operation on our Plantain app database. So we don't have a direct link even through an API. Well, there isn't. The web server doesn't have a direct link back into the corporate database, but we have an overnight synchronization task. But that only works because, well, in most cases we're just reading out of the corporate database. But the few cases we're passing data back, doing a scheduled pull from inside the firewall out to the Plantain app database is sufficient just once a day.
In this particular use case, it's a integration from a supplier to a retail store database.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it needs to push the data, the supplier data, out to that internal database.
Mm.
So that
yeah, and it has to be. It has to be pushed. The other database can't suck it.
Correct. Well, it actually, that was one of the ideas too, was to put, load the Plantain app instance and just let it use the use server requests from inside out to the other database.
Yeah.
But I haven't explored that one completely yet. If that's the better route, it would work.
But that way you wouldn't have to, if the system on the inside of the firewall is initiating the connection, and so you go from, if the secure place is pulling from the less secure place, you avoid the situation where in the insecure place you have to have the credentials that allow you to reach into the secure area.
Correct. Yeah, and that would work because of the server request would come out. I wouldn't even really need to do anything with the firewall because the server request should pass just like any other user going out publicly.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to, for the sake of the recording, I'm going to call it here and say that thank you for attending Campfire today, and we'll do it again next week at the same hour. And I'm going to stop the recording. We can watch the Campfire embers burn down. Anybody that wants to hang around for a little while, we would love to have you. But thanks for attending today.